Brian Topp, NDP Leadership contender. You've only really been known publicly since you declared for the leadership. So tell us about yourself and where you come from.
It's great to be here, Ish. So I'm born in Longueuil. I was raised in Montreal. And I joined the New Democratic Party in the 1980s to work with Ed Broadbent when we were building the party there in Quebec. I came to work here in Ottawa and Parliament Hill. Then I was given a great job working with the government of Saskatchewan. I worked out there for quite a while. Came back with the credit union system, and then in the labor movement. So what I've been doing since then is I've been working as a leader in the labor movement. I'm the head of our union at Actor Toronto. I'm working in the credit union system. I'm the chair of a credit union board. I've been working in the business community a bit. I'm on the board of a labor-sponsored venture capital fund. It's been very successful. And I've been doing various leadership roles in the party. So I'm party president until I had to step down for this leadership. I've directed a couple of national campaigns. I worked very closely with Jack Layton on a number of interesting files, including the coalition negotiations that we had here a few years ago. And like all the other great leadership candidates who are stepping forward, I'm now offering my name forward as leader of the party as we get our heads around the tragedy that we're going to have to find new ways to carry on Jack Layton's work.
Take us back to early on in your NDP career in Quebec. I've always been a follower and fan of Phil Edmundston. Can you tell me a bit about the process of getting Phil elected?
Well, that was a great campaign. I mean, that was in the days when Ed Broadbent, set out. I guess we'd be fair to say that we really started working in 1985 seriously on that effort. Ed Broadbent and his team clearly made a commitment that they were going to build the party across the country by also building it in Quebec. The idea was that if we could break through in Quebec, then we could break through in the rest of the country. A number of us joined the party at that time. When Ed reached out to us and said, we will run seriously in this province. So we started building the party. We were running in various by-elections. Phil Edmundston was a client of mine in a typesetting company I was working in and agreed to step forward as a candidate. He asked me to chair his campaign. We ran in 1988. He was a great candidate, one of many great candidates that we ran in that election. He did very well, but didn't quite win. But then here was the rub. The day after the 1988 election, the RCMP showed up in the office of the Tory who did, kicked in their door, grabbed all his files, charged him with corruption, which that MP, a gentleman named Ish Theilheimer, eventually pled guilty to. And so, don't you know it? Then there had to be a by-election. And in that by-election, Phil stood again. Now he was well known as a candidate. People in the riding were a little choked at the Tories at the time for having presented that MP as their candidate. And so he did superbly well in that riding, but Phil himself, of course, was a great campaigner, well-known consumer advocate. He got over 60% of the vote. It was a great day for the New Democrats, and the first time that we really broke through in the province of Quebec.
What was it like to be a New Democrat in Quebec then compared to now?
Not that different, really. I was always struck then, I've always been struck at how Quebecers really agreed with our party in terms of its principles and its values. Quebecers are quite social democratic in their values, and it was always an easy presentation to talk about what our party was all about. What was at issue was, are you from here and can you win? And so this was Jack Layton's wonderful contribution, that in an overnight success that was almost 9 years in the making, and a lot of us worked to make that a success, that Jack Layton finally got us through that wall of not only do we like you, but we think you can win, and we think this is a vote worth making. And then he got us through that barrier and got that wonderful breakthrough in May.
Tell us about the Saskatchewan experience working for Roy Roman. That must have been a very different kind of environment.
Well, when I joined the party on Ed's argument that this wasn't just about advocating for our issues, although I believe passionately in doing that, but in actually implementing them by getting elected as a government. And Ed was very serious about winning, and we had a great run. I was very, very interested in that idea, not only of pursuing the principles and values of the party, but really implementing them. So after my work here in Ottawa, I was offered an opportunity to go work in the government of Saskatchewan. I was offered the job of Director of Research in the Premier's office, and I jumped at it even though I hadn't spent much time in Saskatchewan up to then, because it was a chance to see what a functioning NDP government in office was like. And I used to say, when I was in Montreal, and people were asking me why was I doing that, because it seemed like an awfully long way to go from downtown Montreal, I said, Well, if you want to be a missionary, then you need to spend a bit of time in the cathedral. And in many ways, Saskatchewan is the first province to elect an NDP government, has our deepest governing tradition. I really wanted to see that. And it was a great job, an absolutely fascinating job. Question period in the House, flying all around the country and the world with the Premier, thinking through the fiscal and economic and social issues, which are very, very tricky, and seeing a really great team that really know what they were doing. And one of the things that I think we need to do federally, now that we are this close to winning a mandate for ourselves nationally, is to dig deep into our good governing traditions in Western Canada and be sure that when the day comes and we are in our first mandate federally, that we're competent, that we know what we're doing, and that we do a good job.
What's the contrast? That's an interesting point. What's the contrast between being a party in permanent opposition and a party that expects to be government or that is in government?
Well, the difference between a party in permanent opposition and a party that intends to be in government is that you decide to win. You decide that you're going to put yourself forward as a governing alternative, and then you do the hard work to make yourself worthy of such a mandate. So the difference begins in your own head when you decide that you want to win. And when you decide you want to win, then you need to grapple with some issues that otherwise maybe you don't, and there's the kind of depth that otherwise you do. You need to think about the fiscal issues, with the economic ones. You need to, when you're thinking about your proposals, not just thinking about the goal that you're after, but the practical steps you're going to pursue to get there. And one of the great things about the Saskatchewan CCF NDP and all the wonderful things that they achieved, the art sport in Saskatchewan, the first in Canada, public health care, many, many other achievements under that government, is they were always clear about where they wanted to go and very practical, one step at a time to getting there. That's what we need to do federally.
I'm going to hop around a little bit into a leadership-related question and relates directly to the Saskatchewan experience. Saskatchewan has become, it's not a very happy place for New Democrats. Brad Wall and the Saskatchewan Party, I think, are about to get reelected. We don't, the NDP doesn't have seats in the province. What happened there, and what's it going to take to turn that around? And if you were a leader, what would you do to turn the support of provinces and regions like the prairies around and in support of the NDP, which is, it's going to need quite a few more seats to win. Saskatchewan might be a place where someone would come from. How would you respond?
Yeah, we need about 50 to 60 more seats to win, which is fewer than we just won in May. So yes, it's a big job, but not as big as the step we just got through. Let's be clear. I mean, we had one of our best electoral results in any province in Canada in May, in the province of Saskatchewan. We got over 30% of the vote there. We had a great result in Saskatchewan. The reason why we don't have any seats is because of a gerrymandered electoral map that divides up the cities of Saskatoon and Regina into quarters and adds very large conservative regions to all of them. In what on its face looks like a deliberate attempt to ensure that no New Democrats can be elected there. And that's a radical change from the old electoral map that used to be in place that in 1988, for example, allowed us to almost sweep the province. So, one of the things that we need to be attentive to is to be smart about issues like that and to argue our corner when, for example, redistribution happens, as it will in the next 3 or 4 years, and argue for a map in which, when 30% of the population of a province votes for a party, that it is represented in the House. But there's no doubt that we've got a fair bit of work to do in the prairies and in Western Canada. Not that we're doing that badly when you look overall, to persuade people there and everywhere that it is going to make sense to replace the Harper government, with which only a minority of Canadians agree, with a progressive alternative, the New Democratic Party, that's much more consistent with the principles and values that most Canadians, including most prairie people, hold. And people in the prairies are practical people. They know that if you're going to be the government of Canada, you have to be trusted with their wallets. They also want to know your heart's in the right place, and that's where we're going to do well. Our values are the ones that people in the prairies hold. And with regard to the provincial scene, don't count out the Saskatchewan CCF NDP. It's a good party. It's running a good propositional campaign. They've got some great proposals going in this campaign, and lots of interesting things can happen in campaigns.
As I said to you, I got stuck in traffic and it took me 3 hours to drive into Ottawa today from my rural home. And as a rural resident, I noticed that there's a huge political split between rural and urban, and the Conservatives have masterfully capitalized on that split. Do you have any, drawing on the Saskatchewan experience, do you have suggestions for how to deal with that strategic issue?
Well, yes, indeed, the Conservatives have divided urban and rural, and they have divided men from women, and they have divided conservative-minded individuals from others, and they have tried to divide us on social issues. That's the Conservative playbook. Conservative playbook is to get their base angry and to persuade progressive people not to vote. And they're perfectly clear about this. They pursue, they pursue hot-button issues to get their base angry, and they run attack ads and slime with their opponents in order to discuss people in politics and get people not to vote. So what's the alternative to this? The alternative to this is not to do more of the same. And this is actually a point that we're going to debate in this leadership race, because I'm not sure we're all agreed on this. This is strongly my view, having done 4 federal election campaigns with Jack Layton. You don't defeat the Conservative playbook by repeating it. You defeat the Conservative playbook by offering a better alternative to it, and what's that? It's to say to urban people and to rural people and to men and to women and to people First Nations and people from in the middle of cities, to offer them positive alternatives on things that we can agree on. An economy that leaves nobody behind. Universal public Medicare. Better public pensions. Addressing climate change. Restoring our good name in the world. Addressing the disgrace that is child poverty. Addressing the lack of public housing. As we address climate change, getting cars out of cities and getting public transit built, and many other key priorities that we've been talking about for 4 elections now, that unite people instead of divide them, that rural people can see themselves in, as well as urban people.
Tell me about your leadership campaign. What's it going to look like? How it shape, form, people? How are you going to operate this campaign?
Well, I mean, this is to begin a leadership campaign that nobody wanted. All of us wanted to make Jack Layton Prime Minister of Canada and to work with him as our leader. And it's a tragedy that we're in this race. I very much regret that we are. I wish it were otherwise, but these are the cards that we were dealt. And I think Jack was clear, find a way to continue my work. And so many good candidates are putting themselves forward. I've put my name forward, and I guess what I'm talking about is this. At the end of the day, the next leader, just as Jack would have had to, needs to do 3 things. First, we need to defeat Stephen Harper in the next election. So I don't want another 10-year building period in front of us. I want us to continue from where we're from. And I've just told you what I think the approach is that we should take, which is we should take a propositional approach, a positive approach, to give people hopeful and optimistic reasons to want to change the government, defeat Stephen Harper. Secondly, we have to govern competently. So having been elected to office, we must not blow it because we don't know the basic elements of how to run a good government. And that's why I argue that we need to dig deep into our governing traditions and be competent in our approach to government. That's tough to do when you don't have any experience in government. So maybe one of the things that I have to offer is a pretty deep experience in government. The third thing that I feel very strongly about is, yes, defeat Stephen Harper, yes, govern competently, but govern for a purpose and consistent with the principles and values of our party. We don't have to become liberals to win. We don't have to drop the principles and values of our party to win. And the issues that I've just ticked off are the ones that I think that we should advance. And then we should say why they're important. And so what is the string through the pearls? What's the basic element that brings all of these policies that we've been talking about for 4 elections now together? I think it's that at the end of the day, in everything we do, our government will work to make Canada a more equal society. That when we're done, after a term or 2 terms or 3 terms, however long we're in office, and we look back on what we achieved, it's that we narrowed income gaps, we reduced or eliminated child poverty, we helped build an economy that left nobody behind, we built equality between men and women, diverse communities, and Aboriginal nations, and we fundamentally changed the country. It's a more equal country with all the benefits that flow from that in terms of health outcomes, longevity, people's family happiness, a more prosperous economy, a better country, a good society.
If you become leader, Stephen Harper is going to, judging by his past record, is going to attack you as a union boss or a union thug or under the thumb of the unions. How are you going to respond to the attacks on unions that you can expect from Stephen Harper, one of whose backbenchers has introduced a private member's bill that attacks unions' financial accountability?
I'm proud of my work in the labor movement, and I'm certainly not going to hide from it. I think the next time we go through a cycle of the Conservatives sliming their opponents and trying to energize their base and to disgust everyone else with politics and to persuade them not to vote, we need to call them on it very directly. And so what we need to say to people of Canada when they start to do that again is look at what they're doing. What you see with what they're doing is revelatory of their character. This kind of stuff is what they're all about. And so if you don't want this at the heart of your national government, and you want a different approach to national politics, then it is time for an NDP government. And we just need to talk again and again and again about what the negative approach to politics that the Conservatives are all about tells us about them, and then offer a better alternative. And I think rather than doing what the Liberals did, which is to try to answer negative campaigning with their own potted form of negative campaigning, that simply reinforce the Conservative messages, that we need to be a true alternative, both not only in our content, but also in our style and our approach.
George Lakoff would call that reinforcing the other guy's frame.
Very good.
Finally, why you and not one of the other stellar caucus members, many of whom you've cultivated and brought into the caucus? I've interviewed in recent days and weeks Romeo Saginash, Tom Mulcair, Paul Dewar. These are fantastic performers. I haven't talked to Nathan Cohen yet. They're all fantastic performers in caucus, and in many cases you were instrumental in helping them get elected. So why you? Why take you out of a role in which you've been extremely successful and extremely helpful to the party, and put you in a role that you haven't tried before, and in which you're, despite all your competence and experience, you're not tested?
Well, I've been involved in the political process for many years and in many roles, and it'll be for the members to decide whether I'm capable of doing this one. I think that anyone who thinks they could do the job should put their name forward, and that's why it's such a great thing that there's going to be so many candidates, and the members will decide who they think is best. And so at the end of the day, I mean, I'm putting my name forward, having been urged to do so by a number of people who I think are well known in the party. Ed Broadbent urged me to do so, Mark Romano did, Alexandre Boulris asked me to do so, François Boisvert. And I guess what they're saying is, we think you can do this and you should put your name forward so that the members can have that choice if they want to. What have I got to offer? I think I know how to put together a national campaign that can defeat Stephen Harper. And I think that I can run a government competently because I've worked at the heart of a competent government. And I'm committed to the principles and values of our party. We don't have to become liberals to win. We can run a successful national NDP government as New Democrats and work for a more equal society. And so I offer that as an option for members. It's for them to judge all the great candidates. And if there's anything good to say about this leadership race, there's nobody wanted to happen. It's going to profile the depth of our team, what a great team it was that Jack built, and demonstrate to the people of Canada that we've got the bench strength to replace the Conservatives and to put in an NDP government. And whoever is chosen as leader, that's going to build the party.